Hi, everybody. Time's flying. Things are changing. Life moves on, onward into the unknown. And we want to make some of the unknown more known to you and ourselves as we discover it and try to bring it, translate it, and bring it to you. It's March 13th, 2021, and you've just tuned in once again with us to CyberHuman Frontiers. And we kind of decided to do a little bit of a two-parter. It is kind of because there's so much that was covered. Last week we featured a Dr. James Giordano, and we have a lecture that he did, which was recorded, filmed by the Modern War Institute, and the title of it was "The Brain as the Battlefield of the Future." And it may not always be a battlefield, but the brain is definitely the forefront of quite intensive research and concentration on the part of institutions from left and right, from up, down, and all over, and every side and in between. There's just so much work going on. And some of this is done at more of the, let's say, the electronic and computer angle of things. And some of that work is also being done at the genetic and physiological forefront. And those two kind of come together at a point. You know, they kind of merge together so that the two different general disciplines of research end up becoming synergistic, if you will. So we're going to get started here with this. So much information. Boy, it's just like, I do know where to start, but when I think of all of it at once, I almost don't know where to start. So we will pick up right away with a video that we played a little bit of last week. And this is just kind of an introduction to where we're going tonight. And I can get this up on the screen here for you. And but before I do that, let's just go through our community guidelines disclaimer. We did put it up on screen, but I'm just going to briefly read it. And please humor me while I read it very quickly. The points of view and purpose of this video is not to induce fear or incite any form of violence, nor harass, nor bully in any way, but rather to share and exchange thoughts with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject at hand, to encourage conversation and awareness. The opinions expressed in this video belong solely to the persons espousing them and are not a representation of the channel CyberHuman Frontiers. And none of our videos claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice. This content is created entirely for your entertainment. This video and our channel in general may from time to time contain certain copyrighted works not specifically authorized to be used by the copyright holder, but which we believe in good faith are protected by federal law and the Fair Use Doctrine for one or more of the reasons noted in the Copyright Act of 1976. And here we go. I'm going to put a share up right now. Please stand by. TMC, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, Andy. Doing good.
Good, good, good. All right. So much to cover. So many areas that we're going to be bringing you over the coming episodes. I tell you, they add one on top of the other. And always avail yourself of the opportunity to look at some of the past streams or go to humaninternet.org and you can do some reading there as well as get links to other videos as well. And here we have one right now. So, all right, I'm just going to let this play. It's very short, and maybe play another one right after this one.
The more we know about the brain, the more we can develop ever more selective agents to affect the structures and functions of the brain in cognition, emotion, and actions, and the more we can do so in a way that's more like sharpshooting rather than buckshotting. But irrespectively, drugs can be somewhat dirty. What I mean by that is they can have a host of adverse effects, some of them side effects, some of them direct effects, and very often what we'll find is that unless we're able to deliver the drugs directly to a particular site in the brain or elsewhere in the nervous system, they can have heterogeneity of effects throughout the body, and that can lead us to some undesirable outcomes. But we don't need to be limited to drugs. No, no, no. We can also use a variety of computational brain-machine interfaces that are both closed and open loop, And these include things like transcranial magnetic and electrical stimulation, stimulating the vagus nerve transdermally, or if you wanted to get somewhat more invasive, but certainly more specific, brain-machine interfaces by virtue of deep brain and superficial brain implants. And I shall tell you that one of the leading projects in developing state-of-the-art brain implants is a DARPA-funded project aimed at the medical side for the treatment of neurological and neuropsychiatric spectrum disorders. And this program is called SubNets, Systems-Based Neurotechnologies for Emerging Therapies. But what you also need to appreciate is that that DARPA program, like any program that is oriented towards engaging brain function to then alter those functions in certain ways, directional ways, can be harnessed for what's called dual use, medical purposes that are then depurposed to medicine and used for other agenda.
And there we go. So what he's talking about here is if we roll the clock back some number of years, there were methods of using drugs to influence the behavior of the brain, but they weren't very specific. They weren't very well targeted. And they had other side effects which could affect other parts of the body. And, you know, that's not what they were trying to do. So now you got some sort of drug toxicity affecting organs, but all you were really trying to do was be able to interface with the brain, or perhaps in some situations manipulate, subdue, or stimulate the brain. And you got to deal with all that other stuff. So the state of the art has been to refine and hone in and zero in on being able to do just what we want to do, or just what these individuals want to do. And in the case of Dr. James Giordano, he's addressing people in the military field. So, you know, it's for the purposes of gaining some sort of tactical advantage, whether it be to enhance the capacities of your own soldiers or to inhibit the capacities of the opponents. And
I have some to add.
Yeah.
So the chemical based forms of manipulation, right? The pharmaceutical stuff that he's talking about, drugs. It's a chemical that's going into the body that's basically manipulating the electrical functions. So we are electrochemical in nature.
Yep.
It requires both as it relates to the communication system that exists within a biological organism, the nervous system, the brain, the organs, how everything works. It's electrochemical. So what he's getting at is that the chemical side, the pharmaceutical side, the drug-based side is well known. It's been ongoing for decades, and he's saying it's messy when compared to the electrical side, or variations that elicit an electrical reaction or change in the brain or the nervous system. Rather than using pharmaceuticals or drugs, chemicals, to induce those types of activities, going straight to energy-based manipulation. So he talked about transcranial magnetic stimulation. He talked about transcranial electrical stimulation. There's also ultrasound, and there's also light. Mm-hmm. And there's also just regular acoustic. So there's a lot of ways to do the very same things. And what Dr. Giordano is saying is do it better. I'm taking it from a shotgun down to something like a sniper rifle, more precision-based manipulation, or precision-based medicine, precision-based therapy. When you start looking at different methods of implementing the same types of goals or approaches, when you move away from chemicals and you move into directed energy-based systems.
And they're looking at and not only looking at, but utilizing and perfecting electromagnetics, whether it be transdermally or whether it be with implanted electrodes or even non-contact, and also ultrasound. I'm flashing up some different patents here as we go.
These are white papers.
And even using combinations of them together for a really kind of a even more precise effect.
Electromagnetics generate acoustic pressure waves when they pass into the body. So
when you said that.
When you look at ultrasound, there's two different grades. There's actually a few different grades, but for the sake of keeping this simple for now, you've got ultrasound that you can apply with an ultrasound transducer, something like a speaker or a ceramic disc. They make other components as well that do things right next to the head. So you put on a helmet or you put on a cap that's got terminals in it that are designed to emit ultrasound exclusively. And they can use ultrasound to modulate different centers of the brain. They have high strength ultrasound and low strength ultrasound. The high strength ultrasound is used to do things like go after tumors, to ablate tissues, which is a fancy way of saying that they use ultrasound like a scalpel. Only you don't need to cut through the skin and drill through the bone to get to the tissue that you want to manipulate. You can use ultrasound at high intensity, high frequency, high intensity ultrasound, and you can go in and you can start destroying and making open channels, if you will, like literally using sound as a scalpel, as a knife, passing through the tissue, through the bone, into the brain, and then taking some action there with ultrasound. That's high intensity. Low intensity.
Is it as a knife, as in to cut its way through, or is it as a knife in such a way as to pass through the intermediate part of the tissue without any damage, but then to reach its target where there's a focal point?
It's both. So the knife is strategically placed, and the knife being analogous to where you get your converging ultrasound waves to create the right frequency and intensity components to actually ablate tissue, to start opening it up, and you're basically destroying cells at that point. So it's both. There's a distinction to be made there. That's high intensity ultrasound. Low intensity ultrasound simply modulates the brain. It doesn't destroy the cells. It disrupts the cells in the sense that it mechanically vibrates them and gets them to fire, to actually undergo an action potential. And the same thing, they can steer it based on converging multiple points from outside the body or the brain, converging multiple beams of sound, if you will, onto a single point or onto a few points in the brain to start modulating the brain or the nervous system. Now, going back to electromagnetics, electromagnetics will convert to ultrasound in the body. It's an electro-acoustic effect. And this is a very commonly understood phenomenon when you look in the medical field. Modern mammograms, for example, utilize electro-acoustic imaging. It is a higher resolution than ultrasound imaging. So what they do is they transmit microwaves at the breast tissue, and they use an ultrasound transceiver, a pickup, like a microphone, if you will, the same thing that they would use for a baby when you're looking at the baby through a pregnant belly, right? But the ultrasound is generated using the microwaves, and it's done with a thermoacoustic effect, which means that...
I think I got a diagram. I think I have a diagram that might show how you could do that.
Yeah, you can just look up thermoacoustics, and Wikipedia actually has a pretty good diagram in and of itself that it shows thermoacoustic effects. What it is, it's microwaves that heat up the tissue rapidly, sub-second. We're talking millisecond or maybe even nanosecond pulses of microwave energy that then expand the tissue, and then they allow it to cool. That's why it's a pulse, on, off, on, off.
Is it done by heating, or is it done by vibrating?
Yeah, it's heating, but it creates a vibration.
Okay.
Thermoacoustic. I'll just search real quick.
I think is not the one that I was going to put up. So as soon as I put this up, tell me to take it down, because this is not exactly what you were talking about.
No. This is not.
I'll pull this down. All right, you grab it.
We'll get there in a second. I just lost Zoom. There it is. Let me pull up share real quick, and we'll just search for it in real time. So I searched for thermoacoustics, and it didn't illustrate what I wanted. So I'm going to put in thermoacoustic imaging, and this is a critical thing to understand. And this is it right here. Thermoacoustic imaging.
Okay.
Thermoacoustic imaging is basically studying the absorption properties of human tissue using virtually any kind of electromagnetic radiation. Right? So without getting into all the nitty gritty of what Wikipedia has to say. This is the process. Biologic tissue is irradiated by an energy source that is absorbed into the body. So microwaves, millimeter waves. Mm-hmm. It says here, visible light, which is photoacoustics, near infrared, which is also photoacoustics. Your phone emits visible light. Your phone emits near infrared radiation with Face ID and the three-dimensional mapping. Radio waves and microwaves. Your phone emits both of these things. Microwaves for standard communication, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cell signals, and then radio waves, they emit using the coils that are for the inductive charging, as well as the near field communication functionality.
You know, like those TMC, you know, those multi-frequency software controllable chips that they have built into them, and the tunable antennas that they have built in would allow the same device to be able to shift down to a radio wave frequency or up to a microwave frequency, perhaps.
That's right.
Without too much.
What you're talking about is exactly the way modern devices are made, and that's how you get a form factor like a smartwatch. That's how you get a form factor like a modern cell phone. Even though the screens are bigger, the components inside are smaller when compared to how they were made 5 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. And it has to do with this idea of building the hardware, miniaturizing it, and then substituting what you're sacrificing in order to gain a nice, sleek, sexy form factor, something that's smaller in size and is more, it's cheaper to manufacture and cheaper to install in many different devices. What you're sacrificing there is performance. It's made up in the software. So the software defined radio, if you want to look up a term that's very interesting, that's related to 5G, it's a common underlying term with 5G, and it really isn't exclusive to 5G at all. This is really the future of radio communications in general, and it's software defined radio. And it's exactly as you said, it's able to take an antenna that has the ability to move from the radio wave spectrum up to the microwave spectrum, up to the millimeter wave spectrum, for example, and through the use of software, be able to use the same antenna to transmit any of those wavelength frequencies, whether it be in the radio wave, microwave, or millimeter wave.
I think another way of looking at it is it's using software to create slices of on and off pulses, which are actually end up constructing a wave shape. They end up constructing a wave shape that comes out of the antenna. And
there's many different ways to do that, but yes, pulsed electromagnetic radiation is the only difference between the only real distinction at this point, I think, that would be of note is a continuous wave transmission or a pulsed wave transmission.
Yep.
Continuous wave, always on, and it's going to modulate with the frequency, or it's going to modulate with the amplitude or the polarization. What degrees, 0 to 360 in a circle, what degrees in a circle is it being transmitted? That's continuous wave. Pulse does all of those things, but it adds the on-off, off-on, on-off, off-on, and it can do it in the nanosecond or the millisecond.
Right.
And this is where, going back to thermoacoustics, the pulsed electromagnetic radiation, whether it be light, infrared light, radio waves, or microwaves, if you pulse it, the absorbed energy, it says right here, is converted into heat, which raises the temperature of the tissue, typically by less than 0.001 degrees Celsius.
Wow. And that's even measurable, huh?
Mm-hmm. So the energy comes in, microwave, radio wave, light, whatever, and it comes in and it's absorbed by a molecule or absorbed by tissue. Based on the frequency, they can select what component within a cell absorbs the energy.
Right, because they'll all have different absorbabilities.
Right, they all have different resonances. So if you can find the right resonance, then you can start targeting proteins, for example, or you can target specifically the lipid membrane. It goes down further than that, down to the DNA, but that requires a lot of detail to be able to support that. Just know that even in a side of a cell, there are specific resonances that can be tuned into via harmonics. You don't have to pick the right exact frequency of the component that you're looking for, whether it be in a tissue or in a cell. You can select a harmonic of the resonance, and then through power amplification or reduction, or through specific types of modulation, you can get this same resonance type characteristics to elicit out of a cell or a tissue, even if you're not right on the exact resonant frequency, because you're using a harmonic or a combination of harmonics.
I can understand how that can happen. I have a little bit of a background in physics. I would encourage people to do just a little bit of reading at the most primordial level necessary about waves and wave characteristics, because the same physics and the same principles apply with waves from very low frequencies, like really low frequency waves, like waves that you'd see on water. Same principles apply at these extremely high frequencies, and the same types of effects and energy transfer happen. It's just that, of course, waves on water, visible, and they're very slow. These are same principles, but extremely fast. And they're also focusable. And of course, they're naturally largely totally invisible to us.
Yeah, they're directional. And so
directional. Yep.
Based on the number of antennas that you have and the sophistication of the software and the hardware components that support the antenna, you're able to create higher directionality, higher focality, the ability to focus. These are all necessary things to understand. So when we think of wireless radiation, we just think of it like a smoke cloud, and it's just out there, right? It's just, oh, okay, I'm in radio. No. You're not just in a cloud. You're literally in a laser light show. If you could see directed microwave energy or directed millimeter wave energy, it would be looking at like a laser light show, only instead of the beams being very, very narrow, like
it's
pencil.
It's not light, it's RF, or it's microwaves.
It's going to be more like spotlights. It's going to be like if you were to have a bank of Batman spotlights, right? For example, I'm trying to use an analogy that everybody ubiquitously understands. Batman. They take a giant spotlight and they shine up in the air, and you get the symbol of the bat, right? So scale that down a little bit and then put out an array of 20 of those things and then put them to music like you would see it something like the Bellagio, or you'd see it something at like a laser light show. But it's just a wider beam, but it's still a beam. It's not this like smoke cloud, if you will, that if you could visualize it, it's just sitting there permeating in the air. This is pulsed.
You know what?
Energy.
If it was easy for us to find and not having to play any audio, but if you could lay your hands on that animation of the proximity sensing of motor vehicles, that kind of showed what you were talking about, how they scanned things. It's something that we had up either one or two episodes
I remember
ago.
It's on Human Internet, and let's finish this thermoacoustics just to see where we to lay out ultrasound. Because I'm glad we digress a little bit, because it's very, very important to understand if you're of the opinion that everything is frequency, vibration. There's the other thing that Tesla said. It's escaping me right now.
Resonance, frequency, vibration, and resonance.
Yeah. So if you believe that, and I do, the idea that electromagnetic energy creates sound waves when it transitions from air into a solid surface or into a plasma or into soft tissue, right? That's a big deal, because now you can start generating resonance. You can start generating vibration. You can start generating these things at a particular frequency. That's exactly right, brother.
Yep.
Exactly right. So this is a very, very important idea. This is a medical concept. So this is not some pie in the sky woo crap. Like, microwave imaging in the medical field is very, very common.
Scroll down a little bit to that diagram on that screen just a little. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right in there.
So let's finish explaining what happens. So microwave energy is irradiated at you, for example. In this case, we'll just call it breast tissue. Okay. So the energy goes into the breast tissue. It heats up the tissue. They say typically by less than 0.001 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
The increase in the temperature of the tissue causes the tissue to expand ever slightly. The mechanical expansion produces an acoustic wave that propagates outward in all directions from the site of the energy absorption at the velocity of sound in biologic tissue, approximately 1.5 millimeters per microsecond. Now, this is just an example. Just an example.
Now we could detect that with an acoustic detector.
Same tool that you would use for an ultrasound on a baby would be able to read this. Now, in a mammogram setting, it's not going to be that way. You're going to have a device that's medically patented that costs a lot of money. That's going to have the microwave elements and the ultrasound pickup speakers, the transducers, if you will. They're all going to be right around the breast. The breast will lay in there and it's able to do it all right there. But conceptually, it's the very same thing. It's the same technology, the same ultrasound probe that would be used on top of mama's belly would be able to pick up this expansion, the biologic tissue thermally heating up and then cooling off, expanding, contracting, which generates this acoustic wave that then the ultrasound can pick up. It says here, when the tissue is irradiated with a pulse, the acoustic frequencies that characterize the acoustic wave span and range from 0 to 1 pulse width. It says, for example, 1 microsecond pulse produces acoustic frequencies from 0 to approximately 1 megahertz. So a microsecond pulse, if you were to pulse every microsecond, when it translates into the body and it heats up tissue and then it cools it off, it generates sound waves, acoustic frequencies, 1 megahertz, up to approximately 1 megahertz. Shorter pulses produce a wider range.
That's totally amazing because it's acoustic. And when we think of acoustics, we think of audible frequencies.
Yeah.
But they can, in very short distances, be extremely high frequencies.
That's right.
Which would be vibrational frequencies that actually could affect molecular structures.
Yeah. There you have mechanoreceptors and you have thermoreceptors in your brain and in your nervous system and in your skin. That's when you feel heat, that is a thermoreceptor. When you feel pressure or a pinch or a pull or a cut, you feel the mechanoreceptors, the pressure receptors, and you feel the pain receptors.
Now, there's an interesting question up in the chat, which I even wonder about myself. Which would be given different waveforms. Now, of course, digital generation or computer generation of waves, usually the stock and trade of that is square waves on and off, ones and zeros, right? However, by way of fast time slices, it would be possible to digitally construct a triangular wave or a sine wave, a smoothed wave, if you will.
Yeah.
And so the question being posed is, what would be the effect of different wave shapes on these structures that we're talking about? And I honestly don't know the answer.
Yeah, it would vary. So the cells and tissues respond differently, and this is where the sophistication of the software comes into play. Everything is not square wave. Now, you could argue in the wireless communications world that we use digital transmission and we transmit square waves and blah blah blah. That's fine. You could say that, but when you look at transmission technologies like orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, OFDM, which is very, very common, pretty much standard when you look at Wi-Fi and when you look at 4G LTE style mobile or wireless transmissions, those don't come out as square waves. If you were to see the waveform that's generated out of the antenna, it's not a square wave. It's not up, over, down, up, over, down, up, over, down. It's not that. It's going to come out and it's going to look wavy and it's going to have many different wavy characteristics that are all kind of going at the same time. They're able to take and rotate this stuff by 90 degrees, for example, all in time, so they can start stacking data. They can use the same frequency and modulate it, and then like every half second, for example, switch the polarization or the polarity by 90 degrees, right?
Rotate the polarization, exactly.
And then switch it back. And what they can do with that is one user in a beam would have the orientation of 0 degrees. Another user in the beam would have the orientation of 90 degrees. Yep. Another user in the beam may have something like 145. And so all of those things matter when you start looking at how do you maximize data transmission. Now, here's how it applies in the medical sense. If you build systems that can stack information that way, where you offer a wireless network architecture that has the ability to modify polarization, to modify amplitude, to modify frequency, to modify pulse rate, to modify the amount of power.
Polarization as well.
Yeah. Right. All of those things. You now have in the environment something that is very similar to what a medical device does. Because a medical device will do all of those things as well. Case in point, what you're looking at on your screen here, you're seeing pulsed radiation go in, and you're seeing this pulse radiation bouncing off of different tissues, different structures of tissues in this field that they say is anatomy. Let's just call this a breast, and we say that there's tumors here. Not a good day for whoever this is in this hypothetical analogy.
Yep.
But the point of it's this. When this radiation goes into the tissue, it's not going in all at a straight line. It's going to go in at varying degrees of rotation. It's going to go in potentially at varying degrees of frequency, and it's going to go in at varying degrees of direction. And the point is simply to create a three-dimensional image of what it is you're looking at, where the reflective properties are different, where the absorption properties are different. And in this case, they're using ultrasound to do that kind of a detection. But the same holds true in real life. Instead of looking for tumors in breast tissue, for example, pulse radiation in a wireless communication environment would be able to identify your phone, what the orientation is in the environment, and then the antennas in the respective devices, something like a cell phone, would be able to understand.
They map it out.
Yeah, they would be able to understand what the polarization is, what the amplitude intensity is, what the frequency is. They would be able to understand all of that. And it's a giant feedback loop. It would just send the information back to the cloud-based computer that's running the antennas. So ultrasound is now that we've severely digressed, ultrasound is a huge deal.
No, it's actually all right. It's good.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. I don't know where you want to go from here, but that's what Dr. Giordano is talking about, is replacing chemicals with directed energy. And in this case, the idea is light, electromagnetic waves, which consists of electric fields and magnetic fields, both of which he mentioned: transcranial electric stimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation, electric and magnetic. And then you also you have sound, which is what we're discussing here. This idea of transmitting electromagnetic energy and having it pass through something other than air. When it transitions from air to something else, it generates ultrasound.
Well, one takeaway from this is, and it's particularly germane to interacting with biological structures, is you can input one type of energy and create another type of energy, which you're detecting when it comes back out. That's right. It might also be said that when any one of these, I'm going to just specify electromagnetic energy, when it goes through a tissue, the biomolecules that it goes through could also act to rotate the polarization or delay or advance the wave shape somewhat, because they also, by way of the way that they absorb energy and then radiate it back out, they may alter those wave shapes. And that's also something that they can watch for. And that gives them clues as to what they're going through, what type of molecules that they've actually passed through. Yeah, and that's so they kind of at the front. I'm sure that they're working feverishly on trying to write software to interpret all of that too, because when they get those echoes back from the tissue, that'll give them more information and they'll be able to more precisely target where they're trying to get to. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's how they would do it. They use the software to understand the changes in the reflective or refractive properties of the electromagnetic radiation. And the same thing with, in this case, they're converting it to sound waves, right? So they would be able to understand the intensity and the directionality of the sound waves, and through the software, they'd be able to render the images. It's really how that works. Yep. Ultrasound. I'm trying to type a little bit more substantiation to the answer in the chat here. Yeah. Go on. I'm just typing something. While we're here, I might as well just show you this. There's all kinds of patterns. All of these in this orangey yellow
are patents from HRL Laboratories. It's Hughes Research Laboratory. It's owned by Boeing and GM. General Motors and Boeing jointly own HRL Laboratories, and they're a giant. They said that 60 or 80% of their profitability in HRL Labs is research and development, a lot of which is for the government. So this is Boeing and General Motors. What I want to show you here is just the names of some of these patents, and I don't know if we're going to get into them today or not, but a lot of these are DARPA funded kind of stuff. So you have here a method and apparatus for modeling probability matching in human subjects. And this is a spin-off of some of these other ones so that they can model probability. Now, the probability is a very open-ended term, right? Probability of what? Right. And a lot of it has to do with your brain. So this other one is method and apparatus selection system based on a combination of neuromodulatory and prefrontal cortex area models. And what this is, these are basically that they put electrodes on people and they start doing all kinds of experiments to understand how they can replicate stimulating the brain. Method to enhance specific memories, being able to enhance specific memories with transcranial stimulation during slow wave sleep. So while you're sleeping. I'll zoom in on this a little bit.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Mapping across domains to extract conceptual knowledge, representations from neural systems. Another one over here, targeted steerable transcranial intervention to accelerate memory consolidation. So you go through, and I think in one of the examples they give in one of these patents, and it'll apply here just at a high level for context. What they can do is they put you through a flight simulator training all day, right? And then you go to sleep, and they've through the course of the day, they've recorded your brainwave with an EEG monitor on your head while you're going through flight sim training. Right. And you go to sleep, and then they stimulate the same brain centers while you sleep. And so it's reinforcement learning while you're sleeping. And what they found is that the people who undergo this transcranial stimulation while they're sleeping,
they develop
that match
proficiency faster, don't they?
Yeah, way faster. Way faster. Their ability to retain information and work through or learn the course material, so to speak, is radically enhanced. This
is something that we need to have access to at our level, because wouldn't you like to be able to, and this is so that we can direct what we want to learn.
You could argue we already do have access to it, Indy.
What's that?
Said you could argue that we already do have access to it. The question is, do we have control over it?
Right.
So I mean that's and we can
access is there.
Yeah, we can go all day as it relates to these bioenergy interfaces. When you look at something like earbuds, being able to have capacitive electrodes, right, to monitor your brain waves, capacitive electrodes, something like earbuds that have electrodes in them that plug right into, again, what Dr. Giordano was talking about, vagus nerve stimulation. If you look at the ear, you have the auricular nerve and you have the vagus nerve and all kinds of other nerves, ear nerves.
Trigeminal nerve?
Trigeminal, yeah. I think that's how, I'm not sure exactly how to say that, but yeah, you've got it.
It's trigeminal.
Trigeminal?
Yep.
That's the name of it?
Yep.
Yeah.
The root of it is Gemini, and then there's 3 subsections of it, so they named it the trigeminal.
So here's a picture. I mean, there's tons of them out there, but you put AirPods in your ear and you've got electrodes all around. You put the big headphones on, like these guys down here. You put these big headphones on and you have electrodes, literally electrodes all around your ear, on top of your ear, all over the place. I mean, there's electrodes everywhere. And there's the behind the ear style. Where'd they go? Right here. These right here are electrodes as well for the sports model for Beats by Dre. So when we look at something like accessing the nervous system outside of the wireless antennas being within near field communication range, when the wireless antennas are sitting literally in your ears or just at your ears, and they're set to broadcast at 2.4 gigahertz, one wavelength of 2.4 gigahertz is 12 centimeters, 12 and a half approximately. So to the center of your brain, it will reach with a single wavelength, which puts it in the near field transmission range. Wireless headphones, when you wear them, transmit 2.4 gigahertz that then allow for near field interactivity with your brain, your face, your neck, 12.5 centimeters in 360 degrees in a sphere, puts it in a near field. Now that's the electromagnetic piece. And it's when you start looking at near field brain manipulation, there are patents for that. It gets ridiculous. They can go in and start modulating your sleep centers and making you more awake, making you more tired. They can agitate you. They can do all kinds of different things for quote unquote therapy, to do things like manage Alzheimer's and epilepsy and advanced stage depression and other neurodegenerative diseases and neuropsychiatric diseases can all be done with near field electromagnetic radiation. Bear in mind, a wireless headphone, 2.4 gigahertz, 12.5 centimeters, that'll go straight into the center of your brain in a near field. Outside of the electromagnetic piece, you've got the electrodes that we've gone over ad nauseum if you've been around long enough. These electrodes exist on AirPods. They exist in Beats by Dre. There's some on this website, humaninternet.org, that talk about Bose headphones that do the same thing. These electrodes are patented for purposes that do things like make sure that the microphone is oriented properly so it can account for misplacement of the headphone, or it needs to know if it's in the left ear or the right ear, and all this bullshit. It's crap. In my view, the real issue that I see with this stuff is that they're playing with the nerves that tie into your ear. There's nerves that go down your neck. There's nerves that come down and around in your face. Like we mentioned, the vagus nerve, the auricular nerve, and the say that again, Indy? Trigeminal nerve are all right here. And this is what Dr. Giordano was talking about, being able to access the nervous system to then interact with, modulate the brain. And it's all very possible right here with something like headphones. So when we look at these patents over here from HRL Laboratories that talk about memory consolidation, and again, all of those in that color are all HRL Laboratory patents that discuss being able to do things like targeted steerable transcranial intervention to accelerate memory consolidation. What?
Makes sense to me.
So here's a beam, an electric beam that would be put into the brain with multiple electrodes. If you want to show that, actually, you know what? I might have a copy.
Got it here where you can grab it.
It's right here.
You were talking about the 2 beat frequencies, right?
Yeah. Here's an example of it right here, where they can put electrodes on your head and then they can generate the electric fields. You see here, you've got a blue set and a black set, and they're generating an electric field. And where the electric fields merge, or where they coalesce, that's where you get the amplitude modulated envelope that then stimulates the brain, and the rest of the brain is left alone. It doesn't necessarily hurt it.
Zero it in on that little red spot in the brain, because they drew the arrows very, very nicely. Right there is the overlap point, right in that red spot.
Right.
And so that's where you get, in this case, looks like a constructive interference between the 2 wave radiators, or between all of them. In this case, it's the 2 at the top. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you are the diehard skeptic, no, this can't be, fine.
It's a really good example of how that targeting works.
Yeah. So we just got done looking at headphones. You're like, well, those aren't headphones. My headphones don't go on the top of my head and the side of my head. And okay, fine.
Yeah, you can still accomplish a certain amount of that just with headphones.
You can, it's
just not
all you're doing is
precise.
All you're doing is changing the placement and you're dropping the resolution. That's exactly right. So when you look at this piece would be stuck in your head, this piece would be running down the ear channel, so to speak, down towards the lobe. You'd be able to do many things simultaneously. You'd be able to potentially generate an electric field in the brain. You could generate a magnetic field in the brain. You could do that simultaneously. You can do it in a far field, or you could do it in a near field. In this case, I'm going to tell you it can be done in the near field, because these things are plugged straight into your brain, and there is a significant difference in the power And the field characteristics and the electric field characteristics and in the magnetic field characteristics when you're dealing with the near field versus the far field. And I can show you that if you want. In addition to that, you've got all of these electrodes that are right next to the nerves that are just under the skin, adjacent to the ear and the side of the face and the neck. And these things literally emit electric fields. And I'll show you right here. These right here are electric fields. And in this case, you have a Beats by Dre. This is the Tour model. These are what, $70? This is if you can't get the high end stuff. And this patent literally says that there are conductive traces inside that generate electric fields for sensing characteristics, sensing capabilities. And these electric fields are generated by the electrodes. These electrodes come in different form factors based on what you're buying. And in an Apple AirPod that look like they're nice, plastic, sleek, sexy things, you've got electrodes. So the point of all of that is this: many, many, many different methods are available.
Even just with those earbuds. And of course, this is who? Is that Beats by Dre or is that somebody else?
These were,
okay.
These are Apple AirPods.
Okay.
And then you have Apple buys, you could look this up. Apple purchased Beats by Dre.
Yep.
And Beats by Dre, who's owned by Apple, they have their own patents, right? So
now Bose has some which combine the kind of pair of sunglasses with audio radiators and with the part, the little arm that goes over the ears.
Yeah.
And so the more different axes that you have to radiate EM into the brain, then the more precision that there can be with where it goes and where it aims at.
Yes. Yeah. There's a couple pieces to that. How many antennas do you have? How sophisticated is the software?
Right.
And that's really the bottom line. If you have high quality signal generators that are behind antennas and you have very good software, then a single antenna can be very effective. If it can pulse fast enough, if the antenna can pulse faster than the body or the brain in this example, are able to.
They almost always can. Electronics are really, really, really fast.
Yeah, so you could have a single antenna be able to do a pretty good job all by itself. It's obviously going to be better if you have more antennas.
Yep.
To your point about Bose has the same thing: earbud insertion sensing. That's what it's for, insertion sensing, with capacitive technology. So these Bose headphones have conductive traces, the electrodes, conductive traces, just like the Beats by Dre or the Apple AirPods do. And Bose actually has a active unipolar dry electrode, open ear, wireless headset, and brain computer interface. Like this, it's the same
brain computer interface.
Yeah, it's the same general thing where they've got electrodes and capacitive electrodes that they're using for brain computer interface to measure your brain and have that translate to doing something useful for a human. Open ear wireless headset comprises of one or more electrodes used to collect biologically relevant information. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking and share.
All of this shows what is not only possible, not only made it off the drawing board, made it out of the patent office, but made it into devices. It's there. And so much of what's behind it is having high speed enough processors that are small enough and efficient enough that they can be worn or they can be powered without too much inconvenience. And then the software, the code, the design of the sequence of pulses, both transmitted and received. And so it's all happening. It's all there now.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to.
So this all gives further basis to what Dr. James Giordano was talking about. He's not just blowing steam. This is really at the point of applicability. I think I'm not even sure what the next segment that I have from him is, but I think I'm going to just wing it and play it anyway because it's definitely.
You also said you wanted to refresh on the pulsing beams and whatnot. So.
Oh yeah.
You want me to do that real quick?
Well, I've got whatever. Yep. Put it up. Yep.
Okay. We'll go through since we were talking about thermoacoustics and the beams and whatnot, this idea of pulsing. You've got, what's a good one? Let's do this one.
Well, what this really shows, when you were talking about having finely, tightly focused beams as opposed to it being a cloud, this is what is in modern equipped cars that have anti-collision technologies in them now.
Your phone can do this too. It just doesn't have as many beams available at the same time. Your phone could do the same exact thing. This is just software. You're looking at an antenna array that's probably got 30 to 60 antenna elements.
Right.
And you've got sophisticated software. So to take that software and port it over to something like a phone, all you're doing is scaling down the number of hardware components that the software has access to. It still can do this.
Right. So look at the scanning. That's all usually coming from something under the front manufacturer's medallion. On
phased array radar platform thing that you showed with the drone, and you had it laid up against a cell phone. You remember that?
Yep.
That's all it is. And it's
run that thing again. That might have gone by too fast for people to see, or even pause it somewhere on there. What I look at and I marvel at is the beauty and the agility of these beams to be steered, and to, they're sending out, they're looking for a read back, they're looking for an echo back. Okay.
Yeah, there's another one I'll show you too, to match up what you're saying right now. There's another video that's good at that.
So look at that. The red is scanning, and the blue is actually it's tracking on certain points.
It's
so
all
we're scanning
pulsing
and tracking both.
Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a stable line there, a stable beam on those things, but they're really pulsing. Those are pulsing so that it can measure the reflections from different angles.
Yep.
And so what this thing's showing is basically you have radio waves or millimeter waves, whatever. Typically, I think those are 70 gigahertz is what the cars are running for their radar. But then you also have lidar that's using light to scan.
So now take this at a reduced level of sophistication and take a good look at the two antennas sticking out of your router, if it's even so primitive as to have antennas sticking out of it, and recognize that by way of software control, beams can be used to do the same thing right in your home, as well as out of your phone, but not quite as advanced as this.
Just want you to see this one piece right here, man. This is important. He's scanning a human right here, and it's getting the micro Doppler. It's getting the micro Doppler effect. So it's scanning the heart rate, it's scanning breathing rate, it's understanding it's a live biological. This is a car that's directing energy that's the broadcast frequency that's allowable for car radar. It's constantly trained in on that human. You're being irradiated. You're being irradiated by that car.
Yep.
And so, okay, you see one car, no big deal. Okay, well, what happens when 50% of the cars have this technology? A lot of them already do.
Oh yeah, they do.
So
you can buy that. That's the advanced technology package that you can opt for when you buy a car.
That's right. And then this is the one that's got the. So
I'm looking at the comments now. Okay, so yeah, W2 getting to the part that you were going to talk about. Okay, it's skipping down to what Truth Hunter said here. The body emitting electrical fields, it is able to detect when another outside field is interacting with it. And so how can we tap into cognitive? Well, that's a good question. Cognitively being alerted to that? I don't know, but I wish we could. And that is something, there may be some sort of a wearable that somebody could come up with that would let you know by, it'd actually give you an indication. It would say, yes, you're being scanned right now at such frequency from such vector coming in at you. I am sure that if these things can be built, the ones that we're illustrating now, that you could also build something else that would be more of a detector so that you'd know what's coming at you. And now more connections.
Your phone can already do that. It's just you don't have access to that.
It's not enabled. That's right. It's enabled, but it's not giving you a readout.
You don't get that information nowhere.
Nope. That's right. Isn't that a little bit bothersome to know that you're walking around with a device that has all of these capabilities and you can't see it? It would be so easy to have you have a tile on the face of that thing that you could hit, and it would put up a display of what's in that environment all around you. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, that'd be nice.
All right. So,
and I think that this technology can create new opportunities for terrorism. Yes, it could. There are people that hack their way into all kinds of devices, and yeah, absolutely.
This technology would make you the terrorist. And I say that facetiously as a joke. And what I mean by that is this: if this technology were weaponized, and because the topic of the show really is neurocyber warfare, right? Neuroscience and technology as a warfare tool of warfare. There's a reason for that, right? It's these technologies enable the ability to manipulate the human mind.
Yep.
And so, yeah, to your point and to the comment in chat, that's absolutely true. If the network is not secure, hashtag Huawei, if the network is not secure, you run the risk of allowing your population to be subjected to nefarious action, nefarious activity in the cyber domain that potentially could disrupt their daily life, whether it be at their job or at their home or when they're out on their own free time. They can be disrupted. Their normal activity, their sense of normalcy, their normal behavior could potentially be disrupted with something as simple as a cell phone or a series of cell phones. And again, if you're a complete skeptic about this, I implore you to contemplate what it takes to run a cell phone network efficiently so you don't have drop calls. You have to know where these devices are. You have to be able to talk to these devices in real time simultaneously. The infrastructure and the hardware to create unique personal connections from many different places at the same time to one location already exists. It's known as wireless telecommunication, modern wireless telecommunication. It already exists. So the only piece that is missing, so to speak, with the visualization is how sophisticated is the software, and can the software command and control many antennas, many different devices simultaneously to direct energy where it needs to go.
Right. You've got to have the hardware out there, and the hardware is getting put up all over the countryside with new advanced capacity towers, for one thing, and new advanced capacity smart devices, such as whatever your latest phone is. And then you need the software, the banks of computers behind that, gathering all this and interpreting all this data. And
Electromagnetic weapon, U.S. Department of the Navy, 2004. And this thing talks about having a single command and control computer. We just replace computer with cloud. And look up Cloud RAN, Cloud Radio Antenna Networks, CRAN. And then you can look up ORAN, Open Radio Antenna Networks, which is a partnership globally consisting of companies like Huawei, AT&T, and Orange. So you've got the United States, you've got Europe, and you've got China, all partnering together to create platforms that allow the cloud to independently manage every single one of the antennas that it's connected to all at the same time. Each antenna can be command and controlled by a single cloud-based presence, the internet, to focus energy at a particular location. And this translates in a commercial environment. This translates to higher bandwidth. How are you going to get 5 gigs to your phone? 5 gigs per second to your phone? You're going to get it from having multiple antennas send your phone multiple streams of data, that's multiple beams, multiple directed beams to your phone simultaneously.
Yep. And
how many antennas are in your
software? When the phone starts seeing redundancy coming from 2 locations, it can swap off to the next best one. There's all sorts of things going on behind the scenes with these devices.
it's dual use technology in the architecture or the infrastructure world. So we looked at, we listened to dual use technology with neuroscience. The same is true with the infrastructure. The wireless infrastructure that's going up is also a medical based infrastructure. We're talking about sending directed energy around, and it's not exclusive to electromagnetics. You've got the light components, you've got the ultrasound components that can be generated out of things like your phone, but they're all managed. The timing, the precision timing is all managed through the wireless network. So you have many different tools in the toolkit, but the command and control, the structure of it all exists, in my view, through the internet, which at this point is a hybridization of fiber optics, copper, and wireless electromagnetic energy. Whether it be from cell towers, radio towers, television towers, or satellites, we are creating a hybrid mesh of wireless infrastructure that's going to allow for directed energy to be pointed anywhere at any time, and in my view, in any concentration. And that's a whole nother discussion about concentrating electromagnetic energy.
I want to deviate just briefly. This, excuse me, this relates, but it is a slight deviation, but it does tie in. Let me just get this thing up here before I talk about it without showing it. Let me just get it on the screen. So when we talk about normal EEG patterns in the brain, they usually are slower frequency, actually much lower frequencies. If you're familiar with different states of the brain, we have alpha, beta, delta, different rates of oscillation of different parts of the brain. Okay. Now, how would we, and what they are typically, they're actually very, very low frequency. So how would we, and this isn't specifically about targeting any particular area, this is just talking about addressing the brain in general relative to its normal oscillating frequency states. How could we control that, or how could we interact with that using high frequencies, using microwaves? And excuse me, just one second here. Okay. I was losing my voice for a second. Well, one way that this can be done is by introducing a couple of frequencies. So we got to pay attention to what the frequencies are. Remembering that our target is in the range of a normal physiological brainwave frequency, let's say 10 cycles per second, 10 hertz, okay?
I'm going to interject real quick, I apologize. Basically, the biological frequencies that they're looking at are between 1 hertz or 0 hertz, but 1 hertz and like 100 or 120. Okay. The brain waves will go up higher than that, but the primary, without looking at harmonics and complex waveforms, the primary frequency range for brain waves is between basically 1 and 100 or 1 and 120. So go ahead. That's
good to know. I didn't know that. That's all right. So keeping that in mind, how would we, by way of electromagnetic devices around us, all of which we don't need to enumerate, they're all over the place, how would we affect a brain at one of its physiologically active frequencies, somewhere between 0 or 1 and 120 cycles per second? And here's how you can do it. They're showing a picture here of a frequency being radiated at 2,000 hertz. Now, this is where we get in. We were talking, I was mentioning, if anyone's curious, just study how waves interact, basic physics, how waves interact both constructively and destructively. So now they introduce a second frequency. This one is 2.01 kilohertz. Okay, so now we have 2,000 hertz and 2010 hertz. 2000 and 2010. And this could be done with higher frequencies as well. You could do the same thing with 1 megahertz and 1.001 megahertz. You could do the same thing. So when these two energies, when these two outputs are merged together in the environment, and the environment being over here in a brain, then what you get is you get a constructive interference at the point where you see this peak amplitude, and that's where these two frequencies are adding together so that they become large. And then there are points when these overlap at which they nullify each other. They cancel each other out. And now if we look at the cycle of big radiation and then zero and then big and zero and big, what that is it's a function of the two different frequencies that were transmitted out to begin with. So we have, looking at this brain, we have the 2,000 cycle per second radiating antenna or radiating device on the right-hand side of the brain, and then the slightly higher frequency one on the left. Where they overlap, what's being created in that brain is a 10 cycle per second energy field, which happens to coincide with a certain level of brain states. And I want to think that that's one of the more relaxed brain states. So
it's an alpha,
this is how, what's alpha? This is how that's done. Now, you don't have to do it with 2,000 cycles per second and 2010. You could do it with 4,000 or 10,000 cycles per second. You can do it with any frequency that you want, as long as those frequencies that you're using are able to penetrate through into the brain. And I would suggest, depending on what frequencies are used, it's going to enable you to either penetrate further into the brain or not as far into the brain. So this is just a kind of a nifty little diagram that shows how you can really get in there. Now then, on top of that, if instead of just having two radiators, you had a third or a fourth one, now I think I might turn it over to you to try to translate what you might be able to do with that. But I think it would allow more precise targeting of a very specific area.
Yeah, you're creating more than you're creating more than it,
a pair.
Right, it's greater than the sum of its parts. You start getting
more intensity and a tighter focal point, I would suggest.
Yeah, but you can get focal points in more than one space at the same time.
Oh, that's right. That's
understanding how the waves interfere. You can have a wave interference pattern, and then have that wave interference pattern interfere with another wave interference pattern to create like simultaneous stimulation. I'm going to steal share from you because I have a visual diagram that.
So yeah, good. I gave it to you. So what you'll get is you'll get multiple places where they're canceling each other out and multiple places where they're active. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's
here's a superposition of transverse waves. Transverse waves are electromagnetic for all intents and purposes.
And notice the amplitude of the product is higher than either of the sources.
Mm-hmm. So we can manipulate the wavelength here, and you can see that the red it's higher frequency, which means it's a shorter wavelength, and we can actually generate different waveforms based on the frequencies that are overlapped. And it's just to give you an idea of what this can look like. And going back to something like this, and you can take and you can drop the amplitude down, and you can see it shifting to frequency at the bottom. And so this is more or less what can be done inside the brain, or it can be, this is what's also done just when you're transmitting electromagnetics. You can send many different frequencies simultaneously to create a waveform that you're looking for. And then that waveform then is decoded on the receiver side. This is just how modern wireless communications kind of work. Basic. Here's another example of a beat frequency where you've got similar frequencies that line up, and when they line up with each other, you get the really, really large amplitude. And as they cancel each other out, then you get no amplitude. And I don't think I selected sound. I want to.
No, but we can. Well,
it's cool. Okay. I want to see if this will work. So it's a 3 hertz oscillation, and I want to move it to a 6 hertz oscillation.
Okay.
Give our ears a break for a minute, but if you can pick that up, if you have headphones in, or if you have decent speakers. What I'm showing here is this idea of wave superposition, what we're looking at here, but it's done in the audio form, so you can see what, or you can hear what it is you're seeing. And so I'll leave it at 2, and we'll see if we can play along. So you got the wah, 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 and that's what you're seeing here, is that. Off, on, off, on, off, on. So enough on that, but that's what I wanted to share, Andy. It's just the this can be done with electricity, basically, and that's what you were illustrating with the diagram that you had up a minute ago, and it's the same general thing as this. So what we're looking at, this is just a still picture of the very same thing. You have 2 different energy fields, and what Indy was showing, and this paper talks about it too. It's 2000 hertz and 2010 hertz that are being transmitted into the brain, and you get this 10 hertz area where these electric fields overlap, and you get this wave envelope here that has a 10 hertz frequency that then creates the stimulation. The brain picks up on the 10 hertz because it's in the natural frequency oscillation that occurs inside the brain, somewhere between 1 and 100 or 120 hertz.
Can you hear me, TMC?
Yeah, you sound far away.
I do?
Yeah. Nope. You still sound like you're talking in a tube.
All right. So I don't know what happened, but anybody give me a 5x1 or 5x2 or 5x5 if you hear good.
Yeah, you're like a 2 right now.
2. Well, I wanted to be a 6 or a 7. You can literally hear when that tone, which has been created by a higher frequency pair of tones, gets louder and quieter, and that's the beat frequency when the 2 of them are beating together, and that has created a particular frequency, which once again could be designed to be input into a brain and to alter its state.
And they have patents for that.
I ought to like dump myself out and then come back in again.
You sound better right now. I don't know what you just did a minute ago, but you're now at like a 3.5.
All right. Okay. Anyway,
yeah, there you
go. I'll work my volume up here. Going into my audio settings. I'm cranked.
Yeah, you're audible.
Tell you what, it's max now. Did it get any better?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Watch you cut back in and screech, but I'm kidding. Let's continue.
Okay. So all this is just so much background of the many moving parts of the technology that all can be used. I don't know. Where do you want to go from here? We kind of covered that. It's really fantastic that you can use so many different types of energy, whether it be acoustic energy or electromagnetic energy, and by way of the design and purpose of it, influence targeted areas of the brain. And we've gone a lot further at other times. We've gone to the point where, in fact, James Giordano will even get to it, where we actually can get to the point of reading the state of a particular spot in the brain and writing to it to change it. So
yeah, I don't know what other clips you have, but I
think I'll just play the next one and see.
I think we should, because if we end up getting to nanotech, there's stuff yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to drop share. Let's see where we go in the next 45.
Okay. All right, here it is. Sound shared. Really zero this thing back in so it looks right. And there we go. And start playing it. Okay, let's see what he's got going here. This is Dr. James Giordano, and we very much appreciate being able to replay this content, by the way. I think he did a great job.
The more we know about the brain, the more we can develop to be appreciated. But it's not just a question of what we can do to our own. Because very often in raising these questions, we tend to, what I call, err on the side of moral probity, and we recognize that there are particular limitations, limits, boundaries, thresholds that cannot and perhaps should not be crossed in terms of what we can do. And if we intend to cross them, we only cross them with consent, and that consent is highly contingent upon the necessity of a continuity of research and clinical care, understanding what happens to the individual once they've been enabled and enhanced, and what may happen when they're no longer enabled and enhanced. In other words, more colloquially, when Superman goes back to being Clark Kent, what happens to Clark becomes the burden and obligation of our responsibility. However, those ethics are not homogeneous on the world stage. And the
he went in a whole different direction there. Interesting. Yep, that's a factor too. I mean, he's speaking about this as if it is, and it really is, a foregone conclusion that you can either enhance or disenhance a person with these technologies. And he took it to the next step. He said, well, man, what happens? You get this guy who's been enhanced, and he's got all these capabilities and capacities, and now we unplug him from the system, and what's he going to do? How is he going to adapt to not having those capacities anymore?
Probably drool a lot, probably have neural fluid dripping out of his nose.
It is an important thing. I think it's really great that he brought that up. I have a sense of Dr. Giordano, and that is that he is a very well cognizant and thinking man with certain who has a good sense of ethical priorities, if I could put it as simply as possible. I'm going to go right on to his next clip, which is coming right up now.
And this is where we get into the idea of novel neuroweapons. Once again, this is not necessarily new, but the momentum of this dimension of the field has accelerated as a consequence of increased understanding of the brain and increased capability to develop tools and techniques to access and affect the brain. So what are we seeing here? Well, take a look. We see in-close neuropharmaceuticals and organic toxins. What's new about this is the in-close nature of this. Increasingly, we're not seeing these things as weapons of mass destruction against gross aspects of the population, although certainly many neuroweapons such as sarin gas and VX and other forms of neurotoxic agents can be leveraged against large groups of people, but that's messy. More specifically, perhaps, might be targeting individuals on a level that allows either direct attribution or covert engagement with non-attribution. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So this gentleman is the leader of some group. Political group, a social group, a combative group, and under the veil of a white flag, he and I are now to have some kind of a caucus, a meeting. And during that meeting, what I do is I lace the rim of his drink, or his pen, or his seat, or something in his immediate environment with very, very low dose drug or toxins that are going to affect his stability. They may affect the way his brain works, and as a consequence of that, they can affect the functions of his brain.
I'm just going to pause this for a second because there are good comments coming in the chat that I don't want to ignore. I can't scroll them like I'd like to here because it's screwed. See, I tried to do it and it screwed up the share. First of all, there's a major difference between two types of waves. One is transverse versus longitudinal waves. That's not within the scope of what we're talking about right now, but I certainly want to get to that.
I'll answer that because I saw that too from a brother from another mother over there.
Yep.
And look up soliton, SOLITON. Look up soliton waves, and what you'll find is a soliton wave is both. They have photons and they have phonons that exist in the wave. And the unique characteristics of a soliton wave, there are many, but one is that it can pass through other waves and it does not change its state. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not subjected to wave interference the way that transverse waves are or longitudinal waves are. That's why it's aptly named a soliton wave. It literally keeps its information packet, so to speak, intact as it moves from point A to point B. And so that's the long answer. The short answer is your brain uses both, and they use them both. They use both simultaneously, and they use them in varying degrees. And all of those things come into play as it relates to what the signal what the impulse is actually going to do or how it's actually translated in the brain. So the short answer is they use both.
Interesting.
Thought patterns, his relative emotionality, and the behaviors that go along with that. One of two things might happen. He might be completely incapacitated as a consequence of this, or he may change his level of capacity and engagement so that he went into the meeting thinking, I hate this guy's my enemy. He walks out of the meeting going, I love this guy's great. Now, what could happen? If, in fact, this is a gentleman who has charismatic, financial, elected, or dictatorial power, it may be that his followers will then follow him blindly. He came into the meeting as a leader of those followers who were bellicose, who were volatile, who were violent and aggressive. He comes out of the meeting, he tells them to change their behaviors, and they do. Or I could sever the trust. By now, he leaves this meeting, he's espousing a very different philosophical stance and orientation, and his followers no longer adhere to his precepts, his tenets, or his lead, and I fractured the relative arrangement of trust, engagement, capability that he fostered, leaving that population disrupted and vulnerable to intervention, to a coup d'etat, to a junta, to some type of insertive reassumption of leadership.
Interesting. Thoughts?
Yeah, lacing a drink or a seat or something with some type of bioceutical, biopharmacological, something that's going to go in and adversely impact brain function. That's pretty potent stuff. I mean, if it's something that's just a lacing, that's literally a minute amount of material needed to be placed, and an even smaller amount needing to be absorbed or transferred to a person to impact cognition, impact neural function.
Yep. And he's talking about the mind as part of the battle space, and think of what would happen with the relative disposition of people to a person that was in the limelight, and all of a sudden, behavior changes or credibility changes, all by way of having induced a different brain state in them, however it was done.
That's right, buddy. Those are potent tools, let me tell you, especially if you have no idea what's happening.
And if you have no idea what's happening, and it seems like a whole lot of I'm not going all tin hat conspiracy theorists here, but a whole lot of us really are not made to be fully aware of what some of the environment, the electromagnetic environment, and the devices that we're walking around with and that are being sold to us and that we're becoming so attached to can do, what they can do, right? So just things to think about.
Well, cybersecurity is in my view probably the most important component of a national defense at this point. And ironically, it's what Congress knows the least about, which is technology. What's the average age of somebody in Congress at the federal level? You can look at your local level and it's probably gonna be a little different, but at the federal level,
50 and up.
Yeah. And nothing wrong with them being that age, but the bottom line is when they're asking the CEO or chairman or whatever the hell he is of Facebook, Zucky Poo, when they're asking him if he still uses cookies to track users, and Zucky Poo gets to literally laugh and say, no, we haven't done that for like 20 years. There's a problem.
Cookies, it isn't even funny, right?
There's a huge problem. And it's what it is. It's illustrative or indicative of the gap that exists between where we're at technologically, who has control of those technologies, i.e. big tech and the intelligence community, and our proverbial fearless leaders who.
But yeah, look at their level of lack of technical fluency.
They don't have a clue.
They are not even and they
don't have a clue.
We're depending on them to come up with regulation to protect us. They don't even know what they're talking about. I'm not picking on everybody. I'm really not. Okay.
But the intelligence agencies know what they're talking about. The intelligence agencies have a great deal of omnipresence at the federal level. I mean,
Right.
It's
And yeah, W2 Digital Design, this explains so much of what we've been seeing going on, and how much of it is ubiquitous and invisible to people who are actually the subjects or objects or the targets of some of these alterations. Let's just put it that way.
Who believes in magic? Or who believes in, you could argue from an atheist point of view, who believes in the supernatural.
You got a song in my head now.
Right.
You believe in magic.
So the point of it's this.
In a young girl's heart. Never mind.
Misunderstood technology is perceived as supernatural or magic. If you don't understand the technology, then it's unexplainable. It's mystical, it's magical, or it's a supernatural event that's occurring. And so what this is it's being treated almost as if it's hidden knowledge, and it's hidden in plain view if you know what you're looking at. But it's hidden knowledge that the priest class, the ruling class, if you will, the technocrats in our era, instead of the priests that serve the emperor or the pharaoh in our era, our timeline, it is the technocrats have access to all of these tools that nobody understands what they do. They don't, and beautifully done, right? Novel neuro weapons, where we're starting to get into a time and a
this is where it's at, guys.
Yeah, nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are like 100 years ago. These are the modern weapons of mass destruction, straight up. Neuro weapons. These are the modern weapons.
The bottom bullet point that he's got here: high central nervous system aggregation, carbon silicate nanofibers, network disruptors, or network modifiers. Okay. I mean, wow. What's the next one got up on it? I'm going to play another one. Well, I don't know which one should. Let's back up. I don't even know.
Yeah, whatever you got, man.
Or he may change his level of idea of novel neuroweapons. Once again, this fractured the relative arrangeability.
Next one coming up right now.
Furthermore, I can use this very tactically. Some of these agents allow me to assemble the agent on site and not have to stockpile it, which allows me to take the components of this agent into and out of a country relatively covertly, target a specific individual, change or eliminate that individual with very little attribution and trace, and be able to leave prior to any attribution.
Talking about high portability and not having to cart a truckload of anything in and be obvious and do it covertly. Oh, this is so easy. He goes on.
Novichok. Or I could assemble very small quantities of this that would then allow a specific intervention, characteristically in a place that would not allow such an intervention. Think of the use of a derivative of VX in an airport. But I could do more than that. I could also incur much broader type of ripple effects. And one of the ways I could also do that is with what's called high morbidity neuromicrobiologic agents. It's a real...
Let's just take that apart for a second now. High morbidity, also microscopic neuromicrobiologic agents. Truth Hunter, is my attitude okay now? I get worked up about this stuff, but I'm telling you, this is serious stuff, guys. He goes on. I'll back it up a little bit.
Also incur much broader type of ripple effects. And one of the ways I could also do that is with what's called high morbidity neuromicrobiologic agents. It's a real fancy way of saying neurobugs, but high morbidity neurobugs. I may not want to kill a lot of people. In fact, arguably, I may assume what is sometimes referred to as the Sailor-Malin mantra. For those of you who may be fans or students of military history, you may remember that Sailor-Malin, Wing Commander Sailor-Malin, was a South African who flew with the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. And he became well known during the Battle of Britain for shooting up German airplanes but letting them limp home, particularly bomber aircraft. And they would ask Sailor-Malin, "Oh, Wing Commander, why didn't you shoot that plane down?" And his adage was simple: better to have that plane return home with wounded crew who are spitting up their lungs, one dead crewman that they had to attend to and therefore divert their missional capability while in flight, than shoot them down. Because
what do you think about that? Boy.
Sounds kind of like why we moved to the 223 or the 556 round, because because they understood that a wounded soldier has a greater psychological impact and a greater economic impact to the enemy than a dead soldier.
Yep. Psychological impact.
Exactly. And an economic, because the same is true. If you have a high morbidity, in this case, a high morbidity neuromicrobiologic agent, what are you doing to your medical system? What are you doing to your first responders in general? What are you doing to the perception of the public? I mean, look at what they did with COVID, and it's not even real.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's a perfect example.
We could get into that, of course.
But this is just for entertainment purposes only, and blah 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 blah. Middle finger.
Like-minded individuals interested in exploring the superfluities of the subjects, and only the superfluities, all strictly for entertainment purposes. Yes. Next. I'm moving on to his next one. He's on a roll. Dr. James Giordano, you're brilliant. You're a very articulate speaker. I hope that you see that we're trying to give some service, to give some airtime to your excellent presentation. Sir, you pack a lot of information in a very short time slice. We really need to pay attention to you. Here we go.
What can I do? I can use a particular bug that I may be able to now modify through the use of gene editing technique that is ubiquitously available and fairly easy to use to take a bug that was previously relatively benign and non-pathogenic and make...
Oh, I'm not going to say it, but you can draw parallels left and right.
Make a coronavirus.
Connect some dots.
Make a coronavirus.
Dots. And what have we manifold? I won't name what. You didn't say what you didn't say, right?
I didn't say COVID-19. I said coronavirus.
No, don't say it. Don't say it.
But the coronavirus now has four locations in the genetic sequence with HIV spliced in that gives it gain of function.
But guys,
and targets the immune system. But hey, it's not anything that this guy's talking about right now.
Without naming any names of any particular, biological structures. Okay, look what something has been parlayed all the way up into. Okay, and how much economic and psychological effect has been had. Just look what you can do on sheer smoke and mirrors. Okay.
It is the power of fear.
Yes.
Fear and love and hate, I think, are three of the most potent emotional states that a person can be in.
And that's all under the umbrella category of some sort of a passion in some way, a fearful passion, an passion. Yeah. It's emotion.
It's elevated, intensified emotion. And so to take it out of an emotional or a cute and fluffy context, it really what we're trying to define here is an intensification of emotion. When your emotional state is intensified, that's when you get extreme responses or abstract or abnormal responses.
And to never mistake the hierarchy. Emotion always takes precedence over any little rational thought that we might have. It literally can paralyze rational thought. It can happen. Back to James. Hey, it didn't. Oh, I clicked the wrong mouse. That was dumb.
That bug, virulent, pathogenic, dangerous. And then what could I do? I could introduce that bug in key sites. Des Moines, Seattle, Tampa, Newark, Houston. I'd get a few people sick. I'd do it on an airplane, do it at an airport.
It doesn't take much to touch off fear, right? To touch off a bonfire of fear. Oh no, it's coming, it's coming.
Newark, Houston. I'd get a few people sick. I'd do it on an airplane, do it at an airport, do it at a sporting event, do it on Black Friday. And then what I would do is I would take credit for that, but I'd want to make sure that at least part of the symptomatic constellation was not only neurological, was profoundly psychological. Agitation, debilitation, sweating, stomach problems, sleeplessness, cardiac problems, things that are what we call top-down neurological in their effect, brain to body and body to brain in the bottom-up cascade. Then what I would do is I would get on the internet and I would put out over the internet, I did it. Oh yes, I'm that dangerous G group that you should all be afraid of. And
so what he's talking about, bottom up and top down, he's talking about if it's bottom up, it's physical, then makes somebody feel psychologically distressed. Or if someone else is seeing it, but nothing has happened to them yet physically, they become psychologically distressed by seeing what they're seeing. And then that induces a kind of a physical level of stress and perhaps more susceptibility to who knows what. He goes on.
in fact, this is far more ubiquitous than I let on. These are only the first cases. I've let these buggies go all over the country, and your early warning signs are agitation, anxiety, worry, sleeplessness, stomach problems, heart problems. What have I done? I've rippled the sheets of the worried well.
Fear, rippling the sheets of the worried well. They were well, but now they're worried, and now their sheets are rippling for one of a number of possible reasons.
First blush, I get every hypochondriac running to their physician, but at second and third blush, I get those individuals who begin to become worried that they may have been exposed to this, that their children may have been exposed to this, that their loved ones, their kin, their kith may have been exposed to this. Of course, the physicians, the CDC, the Public Health Service comes back and says, no, that's not what's going on. But I get back on the internet and I say, oh, don't you listen to that. That's fake, that's false. Your government knows what's going on. They can't do anything about it and they can't treat you. They're going to.
We have been seeing a lot of battling going on between fakehood and truth and falsehood, right? Yeah, okay.
End up quarantining you. How many people would I need to affect? We model.
Not many. You don't need to actually affect that many people to get a cascade going. That's the thing of it. It's fascinating.
You. How many people would I need to affect? We modeled it. Somewhere between 12 and 240. What would be the effect? Hang on, folks. Within 41 to 45 days, we would crash the United States public health system. Crash it. In so doing, I render the United States infrastructure vulnerable, either there or elsewhere. See the ripple effect? See the disruptive effect? I can disrupt an individual from the level of their cell to their system, and disrupt individuals on a variety of levels, from individuals all the way up to the social fabric.
Interesting, huh? Very interesting. Going to go on further. And we, of course, well, plenty of dots we can connect. This actually works. It can be done. It has been done. I'm going to let him go further.
All the way up to the social fabric. Could you, in fact, pair the threat with some type of conditioned stimulus? So now what you're able to do is to evoke a response in the worried well. I only offer possible suggestions for your speculation and your consideration, if you will.
It's very well worth considering. It's very well worth understanding how even those of us who, I don't know, I guess I'd say we feel relatively immune to just irrationally buying into fear, with repetition and with continued, peer feedback from the environment, it does tend to create, it's kind of a job to keep pushing it off and resisting it and saying, no, you're wrong. It takes energy to do that. And it is a little bit draining. And I think many of us who are of a more enlightened variety feel that we do have to continually battle against people who seem to have been brainwashed by disinformation. Of what sort it is, I won't say, no comment, because this is only for entertainment purposes only. I'll let him go on.
We can even go further. One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. If you're not.
Okay. this is kind of big. So now he's shifting gears a little bit here, and he's saying just how easy, just how much facility is there to be able to deliver something that could cause one of these cascading events of fear and rippling the sheets of the worried well? And he'll talk about that a little bit. And this stuff's real.
We're aware what nanoparticulate matter is. It's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 × 10⁻⁹. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can...
Just going to say this. We don't have an air filter media that is tight enough to still let the air through and will filter particles of this size out. We have not made a type of media filter that can do it. So it's...
Well, we have. We don't have access to it. It would be built into something like the Beast, aka the presidential limo.
Well, there is a technology that can work with this. If we can exploit the idea that any of these nanoparticles have an electric charge on them in any way, then with electrostatic filtering, we can attract them and basically get them captured by an electrode in an electrostatic filter. So there are some ways.
But I would imagine that
advanced stuff, you know.
Yeah, it's not going to be a drop-in filter that you put into your AC. It's going to be it's going to go through a system that's going to run it through a series of
multi-stage. That's
decontaminant, right? To complete atmospheric treatment, not filtration. Yep. It's a complete sanitation where it renders anything, literally anything, completely inert, and that would require a complex system. It's not going to be, your sharper image ion breeze or whatever the hell.
No. Could it be? What was that other company? No, I'm not going to name any brand names. Okay, go on. Good summary there, W2. We're not able to screen on the nano level for general consumption. Nope, pretty much not. Nope, not for the masses, not for all 300 million of us here. Yep. But yeah, absolutely right. Rocco, yep, electrostatic attraction. That's right. Okay, moving forward into this little section that he's doing here. Back it up a few seconds.
Times 10⁹. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. To auto-aggregate, to be able to aggregate in particular areas based upon their biological and or chemical sensitivity. But now we go one step further. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, it was announced that you could then aerosolize nanomaterials. And go one step further, I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space, and these can be weaponized.
Okay, so we have, it's not just coming from us. These are phenomena that we have discussed and shown the literature, the design literature, specifically.
What clip is this?
Show.
What clip is this, Indy?
This is number 13.
I would suggest saving this because we could probably do close to an hour just on this with the few nanotech patents that we had talked about earlier. We don't have enough time, I think, tonight to do that, but the nanotech piece is a huge piece outside of directed energy that I really think we I almost said it. We should come back to it. The nanotech piece.
Yeah. An elliptical return.
We need to ellipse around.
We're going to do an elliptical return. Sometimes we go hyperbolic, sometimes parabolic. All conic sections from mathematics are in play here, all except for one.
Right.
4/3 pi r cubed. No, that's good. 2 pi r squared. No, we don't do that one. We don't do that one. We'll do 4/3 pi r cubed. I'm down with that. All right.
Anyway.
Holy crap. Okay.
You've done at such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. How much?
See what he's saying? The attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate.
Which means applying, pointing the finger, blame. Very good word. That's the one I was looking for. Very good.
Right. So he's saying it, and you heard it, and that's right. It's so I don't know. It's so insidious. It's so invisible. He goes on. But it's a really good point. How are you ever going to know? Also, another thing, and I digress a little bit. What if whatever it is that's deployed has a delayed effect? So now,
that's possible.
First of all, if it was too small for you to ever see it, that's one thing. But now, if it takes its effect 3 months or 3 years later, then how are you ever going to establish an audit trail back to wherever it came from if it was even big enough for you to find it?
You won't if you have government-backed immunity.
Correct.
Pfizer, Moderna. Anyway.
Correct. Exactly. Yep. Just food for thought. We didn't mention any names.
It can become exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. How much of this material would I need? Take a look. This is the front of my pen. This amount of nanomaterial, if be able to maintain and sustain with regard to its deliverability and aerosolization, could in fact affect all of you, or based upon where I come from, New York City, all yous. Look at this. Look at this. I'm carrying that material. Would you see it? Would I have to lug a giant weapon into the room? No, I wouldn't. And what if, in fact, I utilized some form of an unmanned aerial device or unmanned ground device as a delivery vehicle? Something like a drone or a bug. Could I do something with that? But let's keep going. Could I also utilize a whole host of devices?
What if you got it to adhere to the legs of a mosquito? Which, for some reason, they have an affinity for humans.
What if you would just genetically engineer the mosquito to emit viral information that is benign to a mosquito, meaning it doesn't impact the genetics of the mosquito, but when the mosquito injects its coagulant saliva into a human's flesh, that genetic material goes in through the saliva insertion and then interacts with the human. Hashtag Zika, Brazil, and Bill Gates.
But how? That's impossible, isn't it? It's not possible to design.
Harvard didn't design any viral vector mechanisms to deal with mosquito populations. No, they don't have any information on that at all at the Wyss Institute website. You wouldn't have to search it very, very long at all on the Wyss Institute for mosquitoes and understand that there's entire programs designed around terminating germ lines in entire species.
Right. And to supplement your statement, there is not a major pharmaceutical company which has worked to perfect the integration of messenger RNA into DNA of particular organisms to cause the DNA in those organisms to code for a particular biomolecule and make it as if it's a factory. Whatever that protein is that they choose to design the messenger RNA to transfect the DNA with to start manufacturing a particular protein. No, that hasn't been done. None of that's been done. No patents, nothing. There's nothing. Right? Nope.
Just in the time it took you to say that, I just
What's that?
Ta-da.
What's that thing?
This is the Wyss Institute from Harvard. CRISPR-Cas9 gene drives. This animation explains how an emerging technology called gene drives may be used to potentially spread particular genomic alterations through targeted wild populations over many generations. It uses mosquitoes as an example of a target species and illustrates how the versatile genome editing tool called CRISPR makes it possible. Now, this presentation shows you how when the mosquitoes mate, the genetic material passes on, and over a period of time, you change.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah.
We usually think in terms of biochemistry that DNA is the master code and that it transfers that master code to RNA, and that RNA goes through the ribosome, and the ribosome is the factory that creates a protein for whatever the DNA told it to do. Mm-hmm. But did you know that it is also possible for the reverse process to take place, whereby messenger RNA will carry a particular payload of a little segment of code into DNA that permanently modifies DNA so that it will then send out code to the ribosomes to create whatever it was that the messenger RNA imported into the DNA. It's called transfection. Look it up. You might be very interested. But I digress. Back to you.
So this is genetically engineered mosquitoes to eradicate disease. They're citing Harvard and CRISPR in here.
But that's good, though, right?
Well,
they're eradicating disease.
Sure. This is an exciting potential benefit of gene editing that could have lasting positive effect on communities affected by malaria.
That's wonderful.
How do we modify the mosquito populations? Anyway.
It makes me happy.
Well, there are many ways to do this. And what this guy's talking about, backpacking nanotech on a drone, or a bug that's been modified to be a drone, or a drone that has been built in the shape of a bug to then deliver aerosolized.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, that's the old way, or a way, and another way, or a newer way, is to genetically modify organisms that humans interact with, whether we consume it or we're bitten by it or whatever. And through the transfer of genetic information, whether it be food or blood or saliva or whatever, you use that as a vector to insert genetic information.
It's really a whole lot more efficient rather than to have to build a whole bunch of machines to just, take.
Let nature reproduce it for you. Yep. Right. Let nature reproduce it for you. That's right.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what the synthetic biology field is looking at. They're banking on and looking at cost-effective, cheap ways to produce and manufacture synthetic biotech. And what they talk about is literally figuring out ways to use nature to do the manufacturing, something like a yeast cell.
I'm thinking of a new definition of a robot. Robots, we think of the mechanical thing with the mechanical arms, but really, why not start looking at the definition of a potential robot as a life form that's just been reprogrammed?
Yeah. It's a synthetic organism at that point, an android of some type.
Well, we've said it before, science fiction comes true. It does, and it is. I think we were halfway through his thing here. Let me find it. Okay, there it is. Back to this. Here we go. Patience, everybody. I can only click so fast. Okay.
To be able to affect individuals, drone or a bug. Could I do something with that? But let's keep going. Could I also utilize a whole host of devices to be able to affect individuals close in, for example, during interrogations, during social engagements, during human terrain team engagements, or more remotely, in a room, in a theater, in an airplane, in a bus, in a store, in a mall? The answer is increasingly yes. So this then represents for us both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is that increasingly what we find is that neuroscience and technology is relatively easy to obtain. Many of the things that I've just spoken to you about are viable and obtainable directly to the consumer or directly to the scientist. We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize directly to the scientist.
I'm going to play that again.
We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create.
Think, what kinds of products can be easily modified?
Lotion, shampoo, soap, cough syrup, sugar,
right. Food
milk
products.
Yeah. So if we do a nanotech show, I mean, there's there's stuff in some of these nanotech patents that literally talk about using lactose as a base, that use sucrose as a base, that use propylene or polyethylene glycol as a base, making this stuff powder stable, where they de-lyse it. I forgot the term, but it's a fancy term for dehydrate this stuff and make it shelf stable, and they can mix it into
desiccate it.
That's one way to say that. Yeah, there's a term they use for it in a pharmaceutical based setting. But what it allows it to be done is they can take any kind of nanotech and make it stable in a dry form, and then put it in medications. They can pack it into pills, compress it, or put it into gel caps, or they can literally mix it into dry powder goods like baking soda and baking powder and stuff like that. I mean, it's
cool.
Yeah, well,
cool stuff, guys. Cool stuff.
You know. It's just
things that have a much higher weaponization potential. But more than that, we also recognize that there are dedicated efforts on the part of nation states and even groups of non-state actors, and increasingly virtual nations that are using
non-state actors. Could that be some sort of a collaboration between individuals working in academic institutions and people in large companies? Non-state actors with power and with the facility to be able to implement and deliver such technology as they have created, maybe even test it out on a target audience unknowing. I don't know, maybe. Just conjecture.
Using virtual currencies to fund research efforts in these areas. I'd like to think that I'm a smart guy talking to a bunch of very intelligent individuals, but let's face it, we're not the only smart people in the world. And if we're thinking this way, there are plenty of other people who are thinking this way too.
There you go. Would you believe 2 hours flew by?
Boom.
Boom.
And no nanotech.
People thinking this way too. Wow. I just pounded on the table.
That's right.
Boom.
Yep.
Take us out, man.
I think we should. You should save clip 13 and maybe this last one, and maybe we do a piece on some nanotech and look at nanotech vaccines and nanotech pharmaceuticals, which translates into health and beauty care products, and maybe look at self-assembling technologies with nanotech a little bit, where they can remotely trigger this stuff with a change in the pH, a change in temperature, sound waves, electromagnetic radiation. I mean, it's all patented. You just have to look at the dry, boring patents to be able to understand that what this man talked about, Dr. Giordano, is absolutely true. And it's been around for at least a decade at this point. I mean, publicly in the public space through publicly available patents for at least a decade. So we're now moving into the genetic engineering piece, which is beyond the scope of some of the nanotech stuff, but uses nanotech to deliver genetic information, where they can attach genetic information to nanotechnology and then direct it to particular parts of the body. So more on this topic. That's my vote, Indy. I think we should do more on this topic. So good night.